Good morning, WellSpring. How are we doing today? We're doing good. Good. If we haven't met yet, my name is Tim Shaney. I'm the discipleship minister, and I am excited to get to continue in on our series, You're Invited. The last couple of weeks, we've dove into the ideas of you're invited to believe in Jesus and you're invited to love like Jesus. Both Keith and Chris have done a fantastic job unpacking stories like Nicodemus and the woman at the well. And today, you're invited to experience Jesus' miracles. And our text for today will be John 9, as we look at the healing of a man born blind. Now, whether you're hearing this story for the first time or for the 1000th time, I want to invite you to look at the blind man and his story with fresh eyes. All right? So let's be pupils of God's word, and maybe we'll see something new. All right? And if you're wondering, who is this guy? My jokes can get cornier than that. All right? I've got optics to keep up with. I don't mean to hit a nerve. All right? I just can sometimes don't blink because I'll be on an eye roll. All right, I'll stop. Don't lash out. Okay, I'm done. That's it. All right, we're done. So a story like this can bring up a lot of questions about miracles, right? What are they? Why are they? Do they still happen? And did you know that the word miracle is not even in the Bible? The word miracle comes from the Latin miraculum, and it means something that evokes wonder. In Scripture, we see four words, Greek words, that are in connection with the supernatural works of Jesus. And so real quick, we'll just run through those. The first one is dunamis, and that we get the word dynamite from that, dynamite. So it's power, right? Denoting divine power. Simeon means sign. And this is indicating the events pointing to something or someone often assigned to confirm the message or the messenger that it's from God. The third we see is teros, which is wonder, a marvel indicating something extraordinary, of nature of the event. And the last one is ergon, work or deed, emphasizing the action or maybe toil as tied into an occupation or responsibility. Now, today is not going to be a study of thematology or miracleology, as I'd call it. But I know that there are many different feelings about healings and miracles and whether they still happen. So we're not going to get into that today, but I'll make two statements. The first is we follow Jesus because we believe that he rose from the dead, and he's very much alive today. So the miraculous cannot be off the table. And number two, if the person claiming to do miraculous signs is making dollar signs from it, well, then let that be your sign. Got it? So in our text, the word that Jesus uses in the context of this miracle is ergon, work. The word others use when talking about this event in the text is Simeon, or sign, that these works are indeed intended to point to something as from God. With that, let me pray. Father, nobody needs to hear my voice or my words, but we desperately need to hear your voice and to hear your words. So our prayer is, let your words and your works be on display today. Amen. I was about to turn 30. Jen was pregnant with our fourth child, which is a miracle all in itself, but that's a story for another time. And we had a full house of student leaders that night. We had just finished our meeting, and everybody was hanging out. And I don't really know how it started, but arm wrestling had become the activity of choice. Guys, you know this. One person challenges you to challenge someone else. And do you really have a choice? Like if you're challenged, it's just kind of, it's what you do. So I find myself and one of my seniors kneeling at the coffee table, arms locked for battle. Yeah, you see it coming. And then just as I was about to claim victory, with his hand inches from the table, it happened. Several things actually happened all at once. My arm flew backward. A loud crack filled the house, making people think we broke the coffee table. The senior realized something went terribly wrong. and my arm had shattered from the elbow toward the shoulder. We'd find out later it was a spiral fracture, breaking, splintering, and shattering in various places, parts of my humerus, though it was not funny. One ER trip, 3 hours of surgery, 1 plate, 7 screws, 4 days in the hospital later, I was finally on my way to recovery, or at least that's what I thought. A week later, I was alone in the physical therapist's office with my brace off for the first time, and I realized that I couldn't move my fingers or my wrist. And I soon learned that my radial nerve had been severely damaged, being entangled in all the bone fragments, leaving much of my hand and my fingers powerless. I was told the good news is that there's a 95% chance of full recovery if there's movement in the first 4 months. The bad news, after 4 months, the odds are drastically reduced to less than 5%. So I began praying, begging God to heal my arm, to heal my nerve. Countless PT sessions, shock therapy, nerve tests. The bone was healing, but the nerve, nothing. No sign. Every morning after praying, I would extend my arm and I'd try to move my wrist. Nothing. Day after day, 4 months was coming to a close. Nothing. My daughter was days away from being born, and I may not even be able to hold her safely. And I struggled, how do I pray with faith that God will do something that he never promised that he would? What do I do when I see God intervening in others' lives, but not mine? And maybe for you, it's not a broken arm, but maybe it's a broken heart. Relationships that would take a miracle to be restored. A marriage, or a son or daughter who's walked away from the family. And we want to believe that God can do something, but the situation seems impossible. Or maybe it's a broken dream. Life isn't playing out as you've planned. I don't know your story. Perhaps it's a pregnancy that left you brokenhearted and empty, and you prayed for a miracle, but heaven stays quiet. Or your boss matter-of-factly states, I'm sorry, we're just going to have to let you go. And in a single moment, your world is turned upside down and you wonder, how will I provide? Or broken health. You continue to struggle with depression or paralyzing anxiety. Or maybe it's the words from a doctor that feel like a death sentence to a family. And we pray and we call out to God, desperate for him to move. And sure, well-meaning people will try to comfort us with well-meaning platitudes. But what we long for is heaven not to be silent. And that is exactly where we meet the man born blind in our text. Look at the very first line. As Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. We don't yet know much about this man, born blind. He's probably, at this point, not very far from the temple gates, begging from the people coming and going, worshiping at the temple, constantly being passed by without a look. Not that he could tell anyway. And Jesus saw him. Let me just stop and say this. Jesus sees you. He sees your pain. He sees your past. He sees your present. He sees you. You may feel invisible to everyone else, regardless of whether you see him yet. He sees you. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, let me be clear. The disciples see the blind man without actually seeing him. They weren't asking out of compassion, but out of theological curiosity. They saw a riddle to be solved, not someone they could help. There's always been a debate as to why people suffer. And back then, the assumption was all suffering was due to someone's sin. Just read the book of Job, and that was the prominent theme of his friends' accusations. Well, you must have sinned pretty bad to be suffering this bad. So somebody sinned. Was it his parents or him? And this question of the disciples stemmed from Exodus 34, where it says God does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. It's pretty heavy. So they're thinking it's either that or he sinned, right, Jesus? And again, remember that the man was born blind. So if it were his sin, well, then it happened in utero or in some pre-existent state. Well, in that time, we do have records of some rabbinical thought that claimed that it was possible, teaching that Esau actually tried to kill Jacob in Rachel's womb, hence their question. And before we get on the disciples for their question, though we may not have the exact line of questioning, when it comes to suffering, we want to know why. Is this God punishing me? Did God cause this, or did he allow this? And we could spend the next several weeks diving into that question. But the real question behind all of those questions is God good? That's what's at stake. Can I trust him? So as the disciples are trying to determine the cause, let's see what Jesus is concerned with. Verse 3 says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," Jesus said, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." They asked, "How did he get that way?" And Jesus asks, "What can we do for him?" Jesus didn't see it as punishment or blind chance, but as an opportunity for the work of God to be displayed. We see a problem, he sees purpose. We look for a cause, we see pain. Jesus sees purpose. But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. I want to unpack a couple words in that statement right there. The works of God. This is the word ergo. So ergo, it means actions of God. It's God's occupation. It's what he does. Might be displayed. This is the Greek word phaneroo, to reveal, to make visible. The root word is phos, which means light, photograph, photo. So here's the idea. The imagery that this word paints is that light is shining on something so that others could see it. You couldn't see it before. Now it's being displayed, light on it. It was revealed, we can see it. And you can groan all you want at my jokes. It actually makes me happy. But Jesus is intentionally playing with words here. Blindness, seeing, light, dark, day, night. To open the eyes of the disciples, to see that this man's physical blindness will shed light on who he really is. Jesus is stating that this man's blindness is an opportunity for others to see what God can do and in fact is doing. I want you to imagine for a moment being the blind man. All your life, you've seen nothing but darkness. No colors, no beauty, no faces to put with the voices. Oh, and talk about the voices, right? No doubt your other senses are heightened as you've learned to cope with blindness. You knew the voices of malcontent which preceded the jokes at your expense, a shove or a push that simply just intended to be cruel. You knew the voice of pity that preceded footsteps that would just pass on by. You knew the voice of compassion that promised benevolence seconds before you heard a coin or two drop in your outstretched cup. You probably learned to identify people by their smell, by the sound of their footsteps, the tone in their voices. Listening, sitting at the gates of the temple, it's the best place for begging. You would keep up on all the latest news and gossip. I wonder what you may have heard this past week. It being the Feast of Tabernacles, a celebration using both water and light as symbols of God's provision and pointing to the coming Messiah. And just at the right moments, Jesus publicly declares that he is the living water, and then later that he's the light of the world. The latest buzz was all about this man named Jesus. How the leaders were up in arms about him. Perhaps you would even recognize his voice as he would preach or debate the Pharisees from inside the temple gates. Certainly, you have turned your ear to anything regarding this man called Jesus when it comes to hearing the rumors about his healing, or the lame walking, and the blind seeing. Imagine hearing the conversation between Jesus and his disciples. Excited the moment you realized he had stopped in front of you. And then the disciples opened their mouth. It's a conversation you had heard 1,000 times as people debated and blamed you for your own predicament. But then the man they called Jesus says, no, this has happened so that the work of God may be displayed in his life. In my life? Did Jesus, this miracle worker, just say God's work was going to be displayed in my life? What could that mean? Could it mean, why is he spitting? What? Wait, what is he doing? Is that mud? Made from spit? Jesus spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes and says, go, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. And he went. Now, we have no record that Jesus told him what was going to happen. Maybe he had heard Jesus healing another blind man, even using spit. Maybe not. But no one had ever spoken about God's work being on display in his life. His life had only brought shame and burden to his family. So, yeah, he went with anticipation and wonder of what could happen next. So the man went and washed, and he came home seeing. Jesus didn't tell this man his plan. God doesn't need to tell us his plan. We don't even need to understand it sometimes. We simply just need to sit still, listen, and obey. So the man went and washed, and he came home seeing. Obedience comes before sight. Faith doesn't wait for proof. It walks on promise. Often walking in obedience precedes walking in healing. He went, he washed, and he came home seeing. And this is only the beginning of the journey because he gets home and the confusion starts, right? Verse 8, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man that used to sit and beg? And some claimed that he was. Others said, nah, it just looks like him. But he himself said, no, it's me. I'm the man. How then are your eyes open, they asked. He replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes. He told me to go wash in Siloam, and I did. And I went, I washed, and then I could see. Where is the man? They're asking the blind man for directions. That's cool. I don't know, he said. Then they took him to the Pharisees, so they took him to the Pharisees. And as you read through the text, I want you to notice the different reactions to Jesus' miracles, this work of God. Some people, when they see God's work in a way that they don't understand, they demand an explanation. It can't be him, but it is him. And I get it. I'm sure the guy looked different. Maybe they didn't recognize he wasn't begging. He was walking around. He was doing something different than they were used to. He's out of context. We've all done that with someone at the store, like, oh. And the second thing is his eyes were normal now. I don't know when they were blind if they had scales or anything on, cataracts or anything, or maybe they were just looking around for the first time, a twinkle in them. But he settled it saying, it is me. And then they wanted an answer. And his answer wasn't enough, so they took him to the Pharisees. They're in charge. They'll give us an explanation. And for some reason, seeing God's work isn't enough. They must understand it. Contrast this to the man's actions. He didn't understand the mud thing. Did Jesus use spit because it's an instinctive healing thing? Ouch. Right? Or was the dirt thing a callback to the creation of Adam? After all, Jesus wasn't restoring the man's sight. He was actually creating it. I don't know. The man didn't understand it either, but he obeyed with anticipation. When you see God at work, do you demand an explanation? Let's move on. Verse 14. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the eyes of the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Uh-oh. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied. I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he doesn't even keep the Sabbath. And others asked, well, how can a sinner perform such signs? And they were divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. What do you have to say about him? They wanted him to solve the argument, right? It was your eyes he opened, and the man replied, he is a prophet. But they still didn't believe that he had been blind and received his sight. They don't want to believe it, because accepting that Jesus is from God would just change too much. And so, still not believing it, they send for the man's parents. Is this your son, they asked? Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? His parents say, we know he's our son, but we know he was born blind, but how he can see or who opened his eyes, we don't know. That's a lie, because he told them it was Jesus. Ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who had already decided that anyone who claimed that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That is why his parents said, he is of age. Ask him. Look how the parents react to this work of God. Now keep in mind, they had to have been excited about this, right? In fact, they don't deny it. They recognize that God just did the impossible through Jesus. But the bolo about Jesus had already gone out. Claim he's the Messiah and get kicked out. Now, to put this into some context, though being kicked out of anything can be quite traumatic and painful, being kicked out of the synagogue didn't just mean that you would stay home and watch synagogue online, okay? To be excommunicated from the synagogue meant being ostracized by family, neighbors, work, the ability to sell, trade, or buy. It threatened one's livelihood. So they chose to distance themselves. They were afraid of the cost. Allowing the work of God to be displayed in our lives, it will cost us. And the parents at this point weren't ready. And neither were the Pharisees. Watch what they do. A second time, they summoned the man who had been born blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. So the Pharisees hunt down the blind man again. They're hoping to disprove this whole thing. That plan failed. And now they try a different tactic. So they've made up their mind. Now they have to make up their story. Give God glory here is their code for change your story. Maybe they can get him to say it wasn't Jesus. After all, Jesus wasn't technically there at the pool when his eyes were open. So they ask him, what exactly did he do? How did he open your eyes? And you've got to love the guy formerly known as the blind man. He may have been blind, but he could see right through these guys. He knew exactly what these guys were up to, and he likely didn't share his parents' fear about excommunication. After all, he'd been shunned his entire life. What livelihood was he losing? So he wasn't going to play their game. And he answers, I've told you already, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? So they hurled insults at him and said, you're this fellow's disciple. We're disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as far as this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. And the man goes, oh, that's rich. He goes, that's remarkable, because you don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. He makes the same point the Pharisees were arguing with each other about. And then he goes for the jugular. He goes, nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. But here I am. He goes, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And again, the works and signs of God are meant to confirm the message and the messenger of God. To this they replied, you're steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they cast him out. When the Pharisees are confronted with the undeniable work of God, they try to explain it away, but they can't. So they reject it. They couldn't argue with the man's testimony, so they attacked his character to discredit both him and Jesus. They don't want the work displayed. They want it covered up. They reject both the work and those putting it on display. So far we've seen three different groups responding to God's work in this man. The neighbors, they demanded an explanation. The parents, they were afraid of the cost, distanced themselves. The Pharisees, they rejected it. Where do you find yourself when you see the work of God displayed? My hope and my prayer is that you take your cue from our formerly blind friend, because he chose to display it. Let's look at his response. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. And when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Now let me stop there for a moment, because I don't want you to miss this. When you accept Jesus' invitation to put the work of God on display in your life, it will cost you. You may face rejection. Some of you know that pain, what it is to be rejected, to be cast out. You have a Jesus that sees you, that searches for you where you are, and he finds you. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. When he found him, he says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Now the man would have understood what Jesus was asking. Do you believe in the Messiah, God's anointed one, the one coming to save us, to redeem, to restore Israel? "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe." Jesus said, "You have now seen him." He says that because he's not blind anymore. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. And then the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Have you been tracking with this man's response to the work of God in his life? It's been a progression. As a result of his obedience, yes, he went, he washed, he came home seeing. But look back at the text to see his progression as God continued to work in his life. See, because Jesus first fixed his eyes, but he was always concerned with his heart. Look at how his view of Jesus changed. When he was first explaining what happened, he says in verse 11, "The man they called Jesus made mud." In verse 17, he tells the Pharisees he is a prophet. In verse 33, when they push even more, he states he must be from God. And now in verse 38, as Jesus asks him about the Messiah, he's ready to follow whoever Jesus points to. And Jesus says, "He's me. I'm the Messiah." And what does he say? He says, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. He went from a man they called Jesus to, "Lord, I believe." First, Jesus gave him physical sight. Now he receives spiritual eyes to really see. His day began with begging, but ends in worship. Maybe your day began with begging. "God, help me, answer me. Why is this happening? Where are you?" Sit still, listen, and obey. He went, he washed, he came home seeing. Obedience is just the beginning. Choose to put his work in your life on display. Shine light on it. And watch what he does, both in you and through you. He wants to turn your begging into worship. And that's where I found myself, pleading every day that God would heal my arm. Every morning, I would sit on the couch, set my arm out, and try to move it. Every day for the next 4 months, nothing. No movement, no twitch, no answer, no miracle, no nothing. With each passing day, I knew the possibility of the nerve healing itself grew less and less, and it was now the last day of the 4th month. It was a Sunday night, and I was broken. That night, I went from begging to worship. For the first time since the injury, I told God it didn't matter if he healed my arm or not. I would serve him with one arm or with two. His call. And I was finally at peace with it. It's where I knew my heart needed to be for 4 months. But I had been wrestling with it. And you'd think I had learned to quit wrestling at this point. But that night, I surrendered. I worshiped. He was all that mattered. Allowing his work in me and through me, arm or no arm. And I slept that night at peace in his arms. And the next morning, it was my day off. The wife and kids were out. I was spending time in prayer and reading. And like every morning, I set my arm out in front of me. And I tried to move it. And it twitched. And I blinked, not truly believing it. And I tried it again. And it twitched again. God had begun to heal me. The next day, I moved it a little bit more. By Wednesday, it was level. By Thursday, my baby girl was born. I went Friday to where the doctor confirmed that the nerve was growing back, and within a full month, he predicted it would be restored. It's a miraculous week. The moment my wrist first moved, I remember going to my knees and worshiping God and thanking him. But even in the midst of my rejoicing and thanking God, a sneaky little thought whispered in my head, it wasn't God. That's just coincidence. Your nerve was simply just healing itself. So it took a little bit longer than they thought. I had just experienced the work of God, not just in my hand, but also in my heart. And the enemy wanted doubt to win the day. Was it a miracle? Whether God intervened with nature to heal my arm or orchestrated healing to happen at the precise moment that I finally surrendered to his will, I don't know. But I know this. It was a work of God in my life. A sign to me that he wants to use me regardless of my circumstances. A powerful time in my life. To this day fills me with wonder about the goodness of God and calls me to display God's work in my life for others to see the light of the world, so that others can see God for who he truly is. I don't know what you're walking through right now, but I do know that Jesus sees you and invites you to experience his work in you and partner with you to do his work through you. I want us to go back to the part of our text that I intentionally glossed over. It's one of those things that we often do when there's a verse that doesn't seem to fit, or it's weird, it's confusing, but often it's the key to understanding the whole passage. So let's go way back to verse 3 through 5, because hidden in these verses is what I believe God wants us to understand today. But this happens so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Talked about that. Again, our suffering sets the stage for God's work, miraculous or not, to be displayed in our life that others would see it. But then he gets a little cryptic. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Okay, so Jesus starts talking about working during the day and the night's coming. Then he says, I'm the light of the world, a statement that he said publicly a little earlier that led to a heated moment where some of the Pharisees tried to kill him, but he just slipped away, right? And so Jesus knew that his ministry on earth was coming to an end. The cross was coming. He was not saying that he would cease to be the light of the world, but that he physically would not be in the world much longer. But notice he isn't just talking about himself doing the work. He says, we must do the work. We. Jesus is including the disciples, possibly even the blind man. Jesus is saying to his disciples, as long as it is day, as long as we are alive, we must do the work of the one that sent me. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world, implying also to his disciples, while you are in the world, so are you. In Matthew 5:29, a couple years earlier, Jesus preached, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they set it on a stand and gives light to all that are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine for others, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. While we are in the world, we are the light of the world. Jesus is calling us, inviting us, even commissioning us to let the works of God be on display in our lives. While we are in the world, we are the light of it. Night is coming for each of us, but as long as it's day, We must do the works of him who sent Jesus. Talk about this word sent for a second. Jesus multiple times through his ministry mentions that he was sent by God on mission to seek and save. But again, Jesus has puns, and you can always count on me to point them out. He says, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So the blind man was sent by the one that has been sent to wash in the pool of sent. That's a lot of sending, almost as if Jesus is getting at something. He was calling his disciples, the blind man, and now us, as ones being sent. As long as we are in the world, we are the light of it. He's sending you to put the works of God on display in your life. So as we leave today, as you go throughout this next week, I want you to have two questions in the front part of your prefrontal cortex. Will I go and wash? What's my next step of obedience? What's he calling me to? Perhaps it is literally to wash in the waters of baptism, accepting Christ into your life and being baptized into his name. Maybe it's calling on making a decision to follow him for the first time. Maybe it's surrendering your circumstance to him. Will I go and wash? The second is, what needs light in my life? What needs light that I've been keeping hidden? Light to first be healed, reveal it to heal it. And then what needs light in my life, then to be displayed for others to see. But this, whatever this is an opportunity for the works of God to be displayed in your life. Go, be the light of the world.